Your GPU is about to get a whole lot better if it's an Nvidia GPU. Now, I complain a lot about Nvidia products because the pricing is really high and we're getting really not that good hardware. If we look at the 4070, very limited VRAM specs, kind of started with the 4070 Ti. So I'm the last guy that's going to say something that I don't think will help. But Nvidia recently started talking about something that may actually put everything into perspective. For a while, like many of you, I'm like, what is Nvidia doing? AMD is giving us a whole lot more GBs of VRAM in their GPUs, and often they price them well under what Nvidia is selling their GPUs for. AMD even shared this, graphic that shows you the price points of different GPUs. As you can see, to get to 16 gigabytes of VRAM on Nvidia, you're gonna have to spend a pretty penny. For the new generation, you got to go to the 4080, which is MSRP of $1199, even though we're seeing it for less than that with the different discounts and things that we've seen. AMD, on the other hand, even their 6800 as per last generation, that one started at 16 gigabytes of VRAM, which is twice the amount as its competitor, really the RTX 3070 and 3070 Ti, if we sort of like price them pretty close to each other. So as we can see, it didn't really make sense what Nvidia is doing. Obviously, Nvidia has a few advantages over AMD that make people prefer it, and objectively, their GPUs do perform better. If you tell me, and I'll truthfully say it, which GPU would I want to personally use if I want to experience the best gaming that I possibly can, there's no doubt it's going to be an Nvidia GPU if price isn't a concern. Something like a 4090 or even a 4080, even though they're expensive, they're going to give you an experience that you're not going to get even on the 7900 XTX. I want to watch you, put ray tracing, ultra or overdrive, path tracing, and cyberpunk. Try to play that on a 7900 XTX. Yes, you'll be able to at least, turn it on and do something, but compared to the experience on the 4090, which is already struggling with those particular specs, it's objectively better there. So apparently in the future, we may see something that may explain some of the low VRAM usage, and it may actually make your current GPU significantly better. This is what Nvidia calls neural texture compression, and they say it's going to be a huge improvement. Basically, aside from things like ray tracing, textures are one of the things that tax the VRAM the most. Many games have really high definition, highly detailed textures, and now let's hear a word from our sponsor, VIP-CDKdeals.com, a Windows 10 Pro CD key. Add to cart, you put in code CC20. This will also work on Windows 11. You want to go into your settings in Windows, change and adjust your CD key, click activate, and now let's go back to the video. You can see every major game released recently, one of the things they have in common, aside from being really poorly optimized for the most part, they have a lot of textures. They look pretty good in general across various systems. Something like, The Last of Us, Resident Evil 4, even Jedi Survivor. Those games have other optimization issues, but they generally do look pretty good. Even Hogwarts has some really nice graphics. And yes, all these games are not perfectly optimized, but that's the reality of PC games in 2023. What they do have are really high texture packs, things that make the game just look really nice, aside from ray tracing in the games that support it. Now, Nvidia has been using DLSS 3 where supported to mitigate some of these really heavy penalties on the VRAM. For example, a game like Cyberpunk or even Hogwarts, if you max it out at like 4K and you want to do the maximum ray tracing and the maximum textures, if you don't have DLSS 3 on, even a 4090 is definitely going to struggle. You're not going to get the best playable experience, but DLSS 3 does help with that. But simply, that's not enough. What about something that's going to be really hobbled, like a 4060 Ti with 8 gigabytes of VRAM, maybe 128-bit memory bus, objectively worse than a 4070, which already struggles at 4K if you really bump up textures and ray tracing. Now, these aren't 4K GPUs per se, but if a 4070 is competing with a 3080, that was a 4K GPU back in the day. So that nomenclature is definitely going to be a little bit, of a mixed bag going forward when we discuss it. But a 4060 Ti, you can say very limited VRAM specs. Now, if this Nvidia technology where Now, if this NVIDIA technology, the neural texture compression, we're probably going to talk about this in more detail and go over like the technical side. So remember to subscribe for that in the future as we learn more and as we learn how NVIDIA plans to implement it. Basically, it's going to be a little bit of a shortcut where it's going to be able to give you much better graphics and use considerably less VRAM. I mean, the biggest issue that I saw just kind of skimming off the top and seeing what's going on with this technology, maybe the latency might be an issue. That's something we see in DLSS 3. You can also read the article I wrote on DLSS 3 at PC World. I'll link that down below. But as we've seen with DLSS 3, even though it gives you much smoother and higher frame rates with, frame generation, which is, fake frames or AI interpolated frames, that also, it's going to increase the latency when you're playing a game. Now, NVIDIA Reflex on or with Boost does go a certain way to sort of reduce that latency, but I still don't see esports players or those type of games ever really implementing this type of technology. Not that they have to. Those games usually get high FPS anyway, but we're going to run into games that aren't necessarily just single player AAA titles you play and it doesn't matter what the latency is, and maybe they have a mixture of online play where it's a little more casual, but you still need very high, response times. That's where something that could turn off players from, technology like DLSS 3. If you're playing Hogwarts with DLSS 3, that latency doesn't matter too much. It's mostly, especially with Reflex, within a sort of, very, acceptable frame if you're playing that game. So this technology, there's always a price to pay. Obviously, the textures on your screen, everything's going to look better, sharper, better resolution. How it may increase the latency, and we have to see if NVIDIA will have some other technologies like Reflex or other things that may help bring down that latency to make it a better experience. It doesn't seem like a huge difference. I think most people would prefer to have the nicer textures and use less VRAM and have their GPU that on paper doesn't have that many, VRAM GBs, as we say, and perform much better, punch above its weight. Most people would prefer that. It may also introduce other issues that we sometimes see in DLSS 3. For example, things like with texture filtering, sometimes you'll get like weird little artifacts on the screen or with the UI. It's definitely not perfect, and you have to assume a technology like this that sometimes uses AI and a lot of times is, compressing something to give you something that looks better, but it's playing little tricks in the background. You're gonna have some prices to pay. Hopefully, like DLSS 3, in my opinion, the positives far outweigh any of the negatives. I think a lot of games just feel and look considerably better when DLSS is on. It sharpens it nicely. It gives you much better, smoother gameplay, where even the 4090 sometimes struggles with some of these games at high resolutions. So I see this as a positive technology. And then it kind of makes sense that NVIDIA is really giving us a small amount of VRAM. They may be able to turn around and sell it just like they're doing so with DLSS 3. And they're going to say, who cares if AMD has 16 gigabytes of VRAM on a comparable GPU that maybe NVIDIA only has like 12, like a 4070 versus an eventual 7800 XT or something like that. They may say that their proprietary technology, they may say just like DLSS 3, which only works on RTX 4000, their proprietary technology is only going to work on these GPUs, and it doesn't matter if it has 12 gigabytes of VRAM because it's going to be doing that magic in the background and giving you a lot better performance where you're not really going to notice it while not really taxing the VRAM nearly as much. If it works as well as DLSS 3 does in general, that does seem like a way to not have to spend money on hardware where the software side could definitely make your GPU perform a lot better. Now, I'm sure if you already have a fairly powerful GPU, it's probably going to be better. Just like with DLSS 3, if you're getting 60 frames per second and above already or around that range, the results are usually much, much better. If you're only getting like 15 or 20, you can have a lot more issues introduced with DLSS 3 on a GPU that's not powerful enough to begin with. That's probably the reason why NVIDIA kept it out of RTX 3000, even though probably technically it could do it, it wouldn't be a good experience, as NVIDIA's own words, with most of those users, and they would just think it's a bad technology, while RTX 4000 has just more powerful grunt and hardware to be able to take care of RTX 4000. That's something Nvidia could definitely bake into the hardware, especially going forward with new GPU releases. Like, imagine a 4090 Ti that has special hardware to do these type of, like, texture packs and something like that. You wouldn't think a 4090 Ti would be able to, would really need to, in fact, use something like that, but you never know. 8K gaming, maybe that's the GPU that people want to try 8K gaming with, even though 4K gaming is still kind of being implemented. I'm not saying that's where it's going to go, but that's a potential. It seems to me that this technology is going to be a lot better used on something like a 4060 Ti, maybe 3070 level GPUs, where you have only 8 gigabytes of VRAM. The games are demanding more and more VRAM, especially at 1440p and 4K, higher texture packs. You have ray tracing going on across the board in many different titles, with both AMD and Nvidia kind of mentioning, ray tracing as something that makes the game better, but it does have a pretty big performance penalty, as do higher textures. But with a technology like this, maybe it could mitigate some of that issue and at least extend the life of these GPUs. That's the only way I can see Nvidia sort of getting out of the issue they're in with these low VRAM GPUs in 2023, or else they're just going to have a very short lifespan. But if technology like this is introduced, hopefully to the GPUs we have now, I think that may certainly make a difference if it works as well as we think it may work, or at least like the DLSS 3. Let me know what you guys think below. Obviously, this doesn't excuse or change the prices that these GPUs are at, but if they have a technology like this that's in fact maybe even superior to having more VRAM somehow, maybe it looks better and they can really implement it well, like on the driver level, so it's not something that developers have to implement. We know how developers can be a little bit sketchy sometimes, like with these recent game releases. It could be something that's potentially good, or it could fizzle out and not be anything at all, and we're stuck with these very low VRAM GPUs at a very high price. So let me know what you think down below. Is it something that would make you buy a lower VRAM GPU if you knew it existed? Remember to subscribe, smash that like button, and I'll see you guys on the next video.